John, any, you're the guest. Any other subjects you want to talk about, or anything story related, or even something entertainment related that you want to
Well, you
talk
guys
about?
were bringing up anime a lot and manga. Up,
Yeah.
you know, it's definitely a generational thing.
Yeah.
I don't really read manga, but in the 80s, I think it was Eclipse Comics or first, I forget. They brought in like the first wave. Back then, they called it Japanimation. And Japanime.
Yeah,
Before the real terms.
they got all those animus from that Japanimation over there in
I
the
read
Orient.
I read like Lone Wolf and Cub, Area 88, Maya the Psychic Girl, Barefoot Gen. Like I don't know if that's even first wave or whatever, but that's what came to America first. And now I'm wondering, you guys are a lot younger than me. Do you know anybody your ages or younger who even read comics, or is everybody reading manga?
There's a few.
More people are reading manga now.
Mhm.
More
Yeah.
people
Oh, yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Like I read comics and manga, and but even like I'm doing a big manga reading project. I'm comparing like the first volume of maybe 22 to 25 series,
I mean, I
and
read
doing a whole
comics
thing
as
there.
a kid, but a lot
I
of
don't follow any of like the problem is like it's not worth it to follow DC or Marvel anymore. So I
Right.
don't do that
Yeah.
anymore. So
Well, it's like
What
I was New 52, and then it was just whole thing. Yeah.
Do any of you have kids? And if so, do your kids read manga or comics?
Mine's not old enough yet.
my kids are too young. They're my oldest is learning how to read. I think comics will help with that. But yeah.
My nephews, one of them is sort of into comics, but they're not. I don't know. They're almost like adaptations of books. So there's like novels for kids and young adults, and so it's like a comic version of the story instead of reading the actual book. But in terms of classics or characters or even stories you would know the names of, or I would. I can't think of it, but I don't know how you get them unless somebody puts the book in their hands. I don't know where kids would even find them nowadays.
Well,
That's the thing.
Bookstores now.
That's a problem.
When you go, yeah. When you go into the, you go.
That red looks nice.
I was gonna say, because like comics, especially when I was younger, it's just like, well, that's the great alternative if you're dyslexic. You got more picture.
You were also lesdistic.
I got these big Coke bottle glasses so it's like audiobooks, movies, video games, and comics for your boy over here. Because otherwise, I take 10 years to read the chapter to any book.
Audiobooks are a life send, dude.
Oh
yeah. And what I was gonna say before is that we have every reason to be uptight about manga, but the reality is a lot more people are just reading this format in general, and I think manga transfers well to comics too, like in a traditional Western sense. It's just like what you guys are saying. That where do you find them? You don't find them. You walk into a bookstore and it's mostly manga, and it's because they know that that's been marketed.
Or you go based off a recommended. Like in manga, the story you don't have to like if you buy a manga, you just and you want to continue the story, you don't have to buy 7 or 8 other series in order to know what's going on. That's part of the mess of American comics,
dude.
Right now.
I think they're also cheaper.
Yeah, like for
they're making a really
$8
cheap
to $12, you're getting one volume, and it's hundreds of pages, and some of the art's like small and cheap, but it's serviceable. The story, the lowest rating I've given any of the manga I've been reading so far. We can't see it, but
that's right.
The pages are all invisible.
Well, it's like if you go with a big boy too, which is 3 volumes technically, but Berserk. Ooh,
I got all my Berserk books. Yeah,
Berserk.
I mean, that's a little bit
like
more
600 or 700.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is 3 volumes in one technically, but it's like 700 pages of artwork and story, which is insane.
Yeah, this is 3. So much story,
and it's not confusing. Like Full Metal Alchemist, I could get Full Metal. Start with number 1, follow it up with number 2, follow it up with number 3.
I think it ends at like 14 or something,
and it ends, and it has a satisfying end.
It doesn't have to keep selling. It is its own thing. It starts, it finishes, and it's perfect. So I love Full Metal.
Honestly. Here's another thing I preach to a lot is what Japan is doing differently is there's a lot of anime that's one season. And the reason is generally speaking, they make anime to sell the manga. Like they're not really making anime to make anime. They're making it because that's going to sell the manga, and then they're going to forget about doing the anime production.
Are you referring to Death Note and like Full Metal Alchemist?
No, Death Note was an anime original, I believe. Right?
No, it was not.
They're one season, right? They're both like.
No, it's a complete story. Yeah. No, there's. I don't know. They're not usually if they're popular enough as an anime, they'll like even so they'll give it a second season. But
they've started to change their stance, but yeah, for decades, That's Us is right. It would be they would make an anime to promote the toys and or the manga or to sell other products.
So there was a 4-year time wait for season 2 of Attack on Titan. That's because they did Attack on Titan season 1 to sell the manga, and it was so successful. Everybody's like, give us a freaking season 2, and they're like, well,
they had to
have the books written yet.
Yep.
I've never Matt from Metal Movies and Brewskis brought up Hellboy as his favorite comic, and I've never read Hellboy. It always had some like kind of French inspired art, so I've always been curious, but I've never actually read it.
Yeah, it's hard to read the comics because there's so many comics, and it's a series of mini-series. But they made these great library editions. I think they're up to 6. You could just pick them up. You know, I think Hellboy is great. It's a one big long epic story. You know, and then there's ancillary characters like you could get the Abe Sapien series. I think that went for like 60 issues. The Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense comic. I think that went for 100 or so issues. So good.
So we're also seeing something else weird in the comic industry, or even like ebook kind of industry, and that is like you're seeing series go from a place like like those virtual comics or those e-comics or like webtoons. That's what I'm talking about. Webtoons, and like you get stories like this that come over from that, and they give it like the ultimate like comic book treatment. Pages, interesting.
Sorry, dude. Sorry.
You get rid of me again, AC.
You messed up the arrangement.
It's the touch screen on my laptop. I'm fat fingering it, guys. I'm just giving it that.
Well,
yeah.
AC, I've seen your hands. You can't fat finger anything. I have. Look at my hands.
Somehow, when I have a touch screen of an entire laptop, it's still happening. So
that's your eyesight. That's not your hands.
Yeah, I was just saying my eyesight earlier, so that's on me.
One thing I was going to add to the confusion as well, too, is like when you're a kid, and this happened to me a bunch, you got parents that go get like, you know, they're out in the store and they're like, okay, little Joey likes, you know, we can't get him to read books, but we can get him to read comics. Comes back with a Teen Titans comic because she heard that I like Teen Titans.
Issue 214.
I don't know where the hell it is. It looked really cool, and it was more than just like you know, a chapter. It was, you know, like a volume, and I'm like, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Where the hell is the rest of the story? I don't know.
To answer that question, my first issue of the X-Men was X-Men 114.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you know, it was Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin, and the X-Men were assumed dead in the Savage Land. And it starts out with Beast and Jean Grey talking to Xavier, letting them know that the X-Men are dead. And then they cut to the Savage Land. They don't have costumes on. They're dressed in you know, caveman outfit.
Rough clothing.
I had no freaking clue what was going on, and I loved it. It was worth the work, you know. So I said I got to get other X-Men comics, and the next X-Men comic I got was 119. So 5 issues later, I just happened.
You're onto something here, John. You're onto something here. I know exactly what you're talking about.
What I'm saying is the comics was so good that I wanted to know more. It was so. You know what I mean? Exactly. So like I went out of I would lie to my mom and hop on the bus when I wasn't allowed to be on the bus to go to the next town or to look for comics to come back because it was fun to find all this stuff. But you know,
so that was the problem. Like with me though, is like my town is in the woods. Like there is no taking a bus anywhere. There is no like you're not old enough to drive. Guess what? It depends what your mom or dad where they want to take you, and it wasn't the comic shop. So, I didn't have the resources to get that. Yeah. Yeah, and not to mention it was like super difficult, you know, to
If
find
I
a
were to get my
comic shop.
kids to buy comics, I would have them read graphic novels. So a solid story beginning to end, and it does end. That's the way to go.
I believe what happened with me. I think John's onto something here, and it actually makes me think that it's probably a little
Just
bit
gonna grab a
intended.
soda.
Okay. It makes me feel like it's a little bit maybe partially intended with the business model that mainstream comics have kind of formulated over the years. But this whole idea, Bats, that you're talking about also, how it's the same thing that doesn't work for you that maybe works for other people, like John's example, because immediately when he was talking, I remembered why like I originally like started watching Game of Thrones. It wasn't because like people were necessarily talking about it. I just went to band practice one day with my band, and his roommate just had it on, and as I was staying the weekend for band practice, we were just watching wherever he was at in it, just while we were chilling and resting. And
Well, a story
hanging
also
out.
it has to be a super banger, right? Like so,
That's
like
the
similar
thing,
thing happened with Berserk, right? Like I remember my roommate watch with headphones watching the final scene in Berserk, and I'm like, what is he watching? I'm like, I need to watch this. But like there could be like a really good story. And like what if like the only scene I saw was like kind of a boring part of it, right? Like
Yeah,
during the
true.
lull. And then it's like then I never ventured up. But I mean that's a case by case situation. But
And one of my favorite comics of all time is Avengers 165. It's the middle issue of a 3-story, trilogy. And I didn't get the issue before, and I never got. Well, I did get the issue afterwards, but I read that over and over again. Still one of my favorite comics. It was so good, and they did a good job of letting me know what was happening in the issue beforehand. That old Marvel method of just like, oh, you robbed the bank last issue, and that's why we're after, like a little bit of awkward, but so good. And then for like years, because back then, if you missed an issue, you missed an issue. Like it took, I'm not joking, it took me like years before I got 166 to see how it concluded. And if anybody read that issue, the last panel was Thor throwing a hammer at Count Nefaria, and Count Nefaria's like this. And I'm like, I gotta know. But
gotta know.
I didn't know what was happening. I just jumped in the middle. It's like watching 3 episodes of one season of Game of Thrones. But it was
it feels very reminiscent of like cartoons back in the day for us. Like you miss like the airing of the episode, and it's like, when does it come back
on Dragon Ball Z?
But then you want to know. Yeah. It's
but like you don't have Netflix, like or it's like a Japanese thing, so it's like there's no stores that are going to sell it. Like,
well, my mother would watch a soap opera. There was no reruns for soap operas. You missed the episode. So she would watch these soap operas. There were 7 kids. She didn't watch them every day, and she would talk to my aunt. What happened? So she was in a coma and she came back. You know what I mean? I kind of miss that. Like we kind of have everything so accessible that there is no like chasing after that missing comic, or like I remember the original 12 Star Wars action figures came out, and I had to get the Sand.
Oh, in the Millennium Falcon box.
Yeah, it came out, and they were on that stupid stand that you could send away. I was missing the Sand person, the Tusken Raider. And again, I remember lying to my mom, going to the next door to the Play World, get on the bus, and you just like R2D2, 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 R2D2. Oh, Sand person, I got it. You know what I mean? That was fun. But nowadays, I want the Sand person. I just go on eBay, or I go online to Amazon, and I get it.
John, history repeated itself with anime back in the 90s because kids had no ability to get anime. It was like your friend might have the season that he got from a bootlegger. It might be translated. It might not. Like it was this whole thing trying to get anime.
Bats, I have my own story of this. There was a kid at school. We were geeking out about Dragon Ball Z because I was I was at the age where I could watch. I watched Goku turn Super Saiyan. Like
of course, I did too. I was there.
It was fucking awesome. I loved it. Yeah, I was there when the magic was written. No, but he was telling me about this like mystical secret Dragon Ball Z movie that he had. Yeah, and I'm just like, you're a fucking liar. And then
there's this guy named Lee.
This is the
He's a
exact
legendary
story I was-
Super Saiyan.
He's
I
like
was gonna tell.
Super Saiyan 3, and his hair goes like really long. And fucking, there's this one Trunks character with a sword, and you're like, no. As a kid, you're like, no, that's way too badass. That's not happening. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
sure
I
enough,
was that
he showed
kid.
up with a bootleg. It was a bootleg
Yeah.
of it, and I brought it home. I watched it. It was all in Japanese, and I'm like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever.
The sacred text.
Well, for us, we just had the first half of the Frieza saga, so we had to wait for a break for them to translate the second half
Oh
of it.
my
So
God,
we weren't even there yet. And then it was one morning we were watching, Telemundo or something. It was like before church. We had the flipping through just for the 10 minutes.
They got it
We
earlier in
stopped,
Spanish.
and Dragon Ball's on in Spanish. It's actually in Japanese with Spanish subtitles. I'm like, whoa, I don't recognize
Yeah.
this. And it's going, and it was the Cell saga, and Cell shows up. He's like, and
Yo,
it's the same
Cell
thing. I
saga
went told
was
my friends, I
brutal.
was like, guys, on the Spanish channel, they're like, dude, shut up, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, no, I saw it. It was real. It was there. My brother saw it. Like, you guys are liars. We had to wait
Cell-
like 5 years to find. Like, I told you, man. I told you. And they're like, oh,
It's
you're
so
still an
crazy
idiot.
when they're not lying, Evely. It's so crazy when they're not lying, and they actually pull out the mystical documents or whatever. But Bats, you're right. You're right too, Bats. Cell literally was like killing entire cities, devouring them with his tail and shit. That was wild.
Inflating people. Yeah, it's insane to think that we're all like, oh, we're watching this as it comes out. We're getting the story fresh. And there's like millions of people that already know like the future season, and you're like, that doesn't exist.
It's like getting fresh sushi.
When people would try to spoil shit too. I hated that.
You guys watch the Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, you know, in passing once or twice. I mean, very
Yeah.
casual.
But did it make you want to read the Silmarillion, or you know what I mean?
It did.
It did.
Yeah,
Same idea.
I've always loved The Hobbit. I love The Lord of the Rings, but I never read the Silmarillion. Then you
Hobbit is best kids book.
It's hard to hit. It's hard to
you read the Silmarillion. You're like, oh my god, it's worth the work, and that's the way I look at comics. But to tie back to what you're saying, like you picked up a random issue of the new Teen Titans. Apparently, it wasn't worth the work. You know what I mean?
It was. I didn't have. Literally, I had no resource. There's no computer. No. I didn't have any. There was only one store that I could ride my bike to, and it was like a convenience store. Like I'm in the woods, so it's like it just wasn't. I'm thinking, I'm like, shit, I gotta figure out which comic that was. I tried looking for it like a year ago or something like that, and I couldn't find it.
For Free Comic Book Day this year, I went down to a store and it was packed, and Billy Tucci was there, and I got to meet Billy Tucci. Billy's like, hang out. So I got to hang out with Billy Tucci. So I'm just waiting for Billy, and I started talking to this guy, and he's like, I'm not into comics. My daughter's into comics. He pointed to his daughter. She was a young girl. So I was like, I wanted to ask you questions, but I don't want to be a creep. So I was like, is it okay if I talk to your daughter? He's like, yeah, sure. So he brought her over, and I'm like, how old are you? She said 16. I said, oh, I just wanted to ask you, what I'm into comics, and I showed her, I have my own comic being made and stuff like that. I said, but why aren't you into manga? Everybody else your age is into manga. She goes, I don't know. She goes, I picked up a comic, and she said the same thing as me. I got so drawn into it, and I forget what it was. It was like Thor 118 or something like that. She goes, and then she goes, I'd like the numbering system because I knew each number meant a month went by. So like if they referred to something that I liked, and it was Thor 107, then I knew it was 11. 7 months earlier, and I knew how expensive it was. She goes, and now, like, they just restart, they renumber. And this was a 16-year-old girl. She's like, the comics in the 80s and 90s, I love them. She goes, but the comics after like 2005, they're rebooting it, confusing, and I don't. So she's like a 16-year-old girl going after Bronze Age comics.
Yeah, super based.
Sorry.
But she basically said it's worth the work and it's worth the effort, and they made it easy. She goes, nowadays, like if I was to go get an X-Men comic and I got maybe the 4th issue, okay, so I'll get X-Men number 5. She goes, but it's the wrong series, or it's a different miniseries.
Yeah, right.
Again, that's like the only way I read American comics anymore is in graphic novel form, like where it's a collection. That's the way to do it.
Indies, yeah.
I mean, as you can see, like I got these stacks and stacks of
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
Oh yeah.
I
like
used to
manga.
have like maybe one of those stacks, but not all of them.
I just
Well,
comics are shooting themselves with they're making the barrier to entry too tough. They should just keep the numbers
Yeah.
and make good stories. Like no, I started collecting Fantastic Four with 157. The number, you know what I mean? It was just good. It was fun. It had a monster on the cover. It had the Fantastic Four fighting. You know what I mean? Like this whole fake thing that they need a number one. It's crap. You know.
Yeah.
I will
yeah.
say, a part of me doesn't want to try to learn what those other comics were of that story for Teen Titans because I'm afraid it was maybe trash.
The Teen Titans comics are the Teen Titans
it's
comics
not
are
the old-
nothing like the show.
Well,
Nothing.
I've looked into I've done all the comics of the original Teen Titans. I've done that in past 10 years or so. This was definitely more newer stuff. Like this Brother Blood was like a
Whoa.
teenager.
This is right behind me. This is my comic book room.
Damn. Well, and
Yeah.
I will say
Hey.
the thing about
I maybe had like a box worth at some point, but my wife donated it along with all of my books. So,
so I'll say with these manga readers,
There's
they're
my
not.
rack.
The majority of them are not just manga readers; they are comic readers. It's just right now
that's what I was saying. Yeah.
mainstream comics aren't producing. But like, if the mainstream comic industry started producing, which would help out the indie scene as well,
Yep.
They will go to American comics. It's just a matter of.
Well, it's like the Japanese aren't afraid to tell good stories, and they're not caught up in all this ideological BS like a lot of the big Western guys right now. That manga is the creative storytelling force that American comics was for decades and no longer is. That's the truth.
I will say though, something really cool. You're talking about jumping into like issue 100 or issue 200, and you don't know where you're at with the indie scene. Some of these books, they're fresh. Like you're getting issue number 1 from like series after series after series, and it's cool because it's fresh, it's new, and some people are on, maybe they're up to issue 10 in some cases, but the fact that you can jump in and you're on the ground is really you don't have.
You can talk to them,
Yeah, you can just reach out.
Wow. I will say this. Indie creators in the comic scene, no matter how many issues you get, at some point you can pick a good spot in the story and then release just like what manga
collection.
does. A collection, yes. So you get
making more money. Yeah.
The first arc or the first season, right? Is the way I look at it.
Daniel
make it a nice
is planning
book,
on doing that with Jisedai, which I really enjoy.
But yeah, all these manga readers, they're just comic readers. They're potential customers.
Yeah.
Yep. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah. So the more manga readers we get, is the more comic book readers we get.
We just have to stop letting the East drink our milkshake. You know what I mean? We have to learn. They learned from us, and now
can we have that on a T-shirt? We gotta stop letting the East drink our milkshake.
Well, it's a constant give and take, right? Like we gave them Godzilla.
See, that's fair, dude. Yeah, that's fair.
No, guy, like read history. Japanese and Chinese steal everything. Historically true.
Yeah.
It's like ramen is not Japanese. It was a Chinese immigrant, and we really like the way you make these Japanese noodles. Actually, I'm from China. No, you are now Japanese.
Hey, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So.
South Korea tell you all about Japan's stealing ways, but that's another story.
Yeah. All right, end it on the Namkin trials.
We could just talk about Non-King as well. Let's just toss that in there.
You just watched a clip from the Iron Seas podcast. Make sure to like this, subscribe. It helps us out a little bit. And please catch the show live at 9:30 Eastern every Tuesday.